What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here with JaboctheGreat. Once again, we are back with the last word. A lot of football action this weekend, especially in the NFL, as they kicked off their season on Thursday and then had a huge slate of games on Sunday. But as you can see by the title of the video, we are starting off with college football. Huge upset with Texas being back finally. They defeat Alabama 34-24. Big game Saturday night. And yeah, man, we can finally see Texas is truly back.
I know this is like a running joke for sports in general, but I can't. The amount of times that you and I have sat here and said, like, is Texas back? And then we're like, well, no, it's finally here. Texas beats Alabama 34-24 in a thriller game. It was a really fun game all around. We'll take a look at it on the stat sheet first, as usual. So Quinn Ewers is back this year. That was one thing we talked about last week, was they didn't have Quinn in the last game and they lost very narrowly. Quinn Ewers comes back and they win by 10. Ewers goes 24 for 38, 349 yards, and a pretty beautiful 3-0 TD int ratio. So 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Really good game from him. Jonathan Brooks leads the team in rushing with 57 yards and a touchdown. Jatavion Sanders led the team in the air with 114 yards. It was Adonai Mitchell who shined with 78 yards and 2 touchdowns, pretty fun touchdowns on just 3 catches. And don't want to leave out Xavier Worthy. Also had a really great game, 75 yards and a touchdown for him. So just a great receiving core, working well there. Jaron Thompson and Jade Barron pick off Jalen Milroe. Some pretty good interceptions there, set up some scores. And then on the bad side for Texas, obviously not too bad. They won by 10. Burt Auburn missed a 42-yard field goal. That's a rough sentence to say, apparently. So nothing big. Still come out to win 34-24, but a little thing to mention there. For Bama, there's actually not a whole lot to go over. I mean, there is, but we've got just a little less here on the stat sheet. Jalen Milroe, not the prettiest game. 14 for 27, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. A little rough for him at the office. 44 rushing yards, though, is pretty good. Kobe Prentice led the team in receiving with 68 yards. And then Jermaine Burton and Amari Niblack are close behind him and each get a touchdown for themselves as well. So a thrilling game all throughout. Some ups and downs, some times where it looked like Texas was going to throw it away and end up letting Bama get back. But they were able to hold on and come back in the end and take it at 34-24. They have moved up in the rankings, and Alabama has fallen down. So, as you would expect, this was a ranked matchup anyway. But a really, really fun game this weekend. I did say very plainly in the previous video about this game that I am an Alabama hater. So you can imagine that this was a pleasing way to end the college football slate. But I'm just glad it was also a good game.
Yeah, no Alabama fandom over here either. Last week, this was the college football game that we did pick in the preview for the weekend. We did pick Alabama, but we did talk about it. Hey, like obviously last year they did just narrowly defeat Texas, and as you alluded to, Quinn Ewers wasn't there. He got injured in the game, was out. Bryce Young was able to hold it down though, and Alabama got a narrow victory. This time around wasn't the case, and even though they alluded to it, I wouldn't even say alluded to it. They talked about it a lot during the game on commentary. Kirk Herbstreit did, along with Chris Fowler. Not putting the entire game on Jalen Milroe, but I said it last week. Even just after one game, I wasn't putting too much stock into it, because considering who Alabama played in week 1, Jalen Milroe obviously is no Bryce Young yet. I mean, we actually talked about it. I think it was against Miami. I think it was Bryce Young's first game 2 years ago, and we did a little highlight on it on the podcast. He looked great in that first game, and it doesn't take long, for these QBs to look good if they're really that good. And Jalen Milroe, he has time. Hopefully, I think he'll have time if they don't decide to make a change. But aside from his few deep balls, which obviously, he has the ability to throw it deep, and when he does connect, as he did a few times, it looks good. But for the most part, it's just meh. It just wasn't great. Definitely took off a whole lot too. He was running the one run. And I guess you could say that about a lot of quarterbacks nowadays, obviously. That's just kind of how the game is moving. But yeah, Jalen, he ran the ball, I think, over 10 times, definitely for sure. I think he ran it more than Chase McClellan did. So, yeah, he took off a lot. There weren't too many times where he just sat back and just was able to pick apart the defense. Yeah, again, not the entire game isn't on him. The 2 picks obviously hurt, but yeah, not a great performance by him, of course. And I think, as they said during the broadcast, I think they're going to have some discussions because it wasn't like it was very obvious who was going to be the starter this year. I figured it was going to be Jalen Monroe, but it wasn't a clear cut decision. Excuse me, like it usually is. As for the past few seasons, so that's something that they're going to have to figure out in Alabama. And as you mentioned, they dropped all the way down to 10, and now with LSU having already lost in week 1, now they're on equal footing there. So if they had won against a ranked team like Texas, who jumped up to 4 now, which is their highest ranking in years. Maybe Alabama, if they lost later on in the season, they still have that win there. But now you're kind of on equal footing with LSU. Didn't get destroyed, but both teams have a loss 1-1 this early in the season to a very highly ranked opponent. So, yeah, I kick it back over to you. I think they're just going to have to figure something out at quarterback. He's going to have to, if he's going to keep playing, he's going to have to not rely too much on his legs because he has that ability. But I mean, he just ran too much. I've never seen a guy just run that much, like out of to scramble out of a pass. Like if you're scripting runs for him throughout the game, that's one thing. But it pretty much run like every other play where he was just okay. I can't get this. Boom, I'm going, and he just really wouldn't wait to even get a good pass. So yeah, that's something that they're gonna have to figure out in the coming weeks. And they got that opportunity, before they really get deep into conference play.
Yeah, and just to build off that, I mean, you talk about how many times he ran. He carried 15 times, which was the leading for the team, and he had 14 completed passes. So he ran one more time than the amount of passes he completed. Just kind of a crazy breakdown, and the ability to read the defense and pick it apart, and not just like taking off before things come together. Obviously, he threw more than 15 times. He threw 27 times, but just a crazy thing to put into perspective how quick he was to run, and he had those 44 rushing yards, but one of his rushes was 20 yards. So he gets all those yardage on just 15 on those 15 carries, and it just turns out to not even be the most efficient day of running. And it's because, as you just alluded to, not these runs weren't all scripted for him, right? A scripted run for a quarterback is probably going to be a little more efficient, give you a few more yards. You just take off because things are crumbling. You're either going to get 20 or you're going to get like 2. It's just how it goes. Um, so yeah, I don't want to put the whole game on Jalen Monroe. I mean, there's a mathematical argument. Both interceptions, one interception leads to a field goal, one interception leads to a touchdown. That's 10 points. Alabama loses by 10. You can make that argument, but it's a little unfair to the entirety of the game. But it is detrimental. I mean, those 2 picks and just the inability to get the passing game going as good as they probably wanted to is not going to be great. I mean, a college football team having their leading receiver cap out at 68 yards is not the best thing, especially when their leading rusher caps out at 45 yards. So just a little bit of an inefficient day for Alabama against that stout Texas defense. And the game wasn't a perfect game for either team, right? Texas had to punt a few times. Texas missed a field goal. Texas turned it over on downs. But overall, when you look at the game flow, it definitely flowed a little more in Texas's favor. Texas punts on their first drive, and Alabama throws a pick. Texas is able to get that field goal. Bama answers, and then Texas answers with a touchdown. Then we get a punt and a field goal and some punts, and we're at halftime. Come back, Alabama looks a little more alive. They get a field goal, Texas punts, then Alabama punts, and then Texas misses that field goal, which would give Alabama a good opportunity, except that they go 3 plays, negative 10 yards in just a minute and a half, and punt. And then Texas turns it over on downs. So again, everything in their hands to go up multiple scores, but kind of fumbling around. And that's when it gets a little scary. They turn it over on downs, and Alabama wakes up and gets a touchdown. And then Texas, I guess, finally also realized we have to stop messing around. And then a minute, they get 75 yards down the field, score. It's 20-16 now. And then Alabama throws another pick, which will give Texas the opportunity to go up 27-16. And then Alabama scores again, making it 34-24, and that'll be pretty much it after the next, or making it 27-24, and then you've got the Texas touchdown at the end, and then that's pretty much it. You can feel the game is drained by then. So a good back and forth in the second half. Texas giving a lot of mistakes away to Alabama, and that's another thing that I think that deserves a little bit of light shine on it, is you don't often see a team give Alabama that many opportunities, and Alabama not really pick them apart for it. I mean, turning it over on downs, missing field goals, just handing the ball over, and then still losing by 10, or still winning by 10, I guess would be the better way to phrase that. It's a crazy thing to see against a team like Alabama with the record and the kind of atmosphere we have around a team like Alabama. So Texas, not a perfect game here. Definitely good. They beat Alabama by 10. They deserve to jump up to 4. Um, you could maybe argue for how far they jump, but I think it's fair. But this wasn't like the world's best game for Texas either. I do think we can finally say Texas is back, but there's definitely room here for Texas to clean up some of the ways they played, some of the risks they took that didn't quite work, and improve in the future.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, you can't blame the entire game on Jalen Murrow. It would be unfair, but it also would be unfair to Texas. You got to give them a whole lot of credit. Whether we don't know how good this Alabama team is, I said it last week. We don't know just based off of week one. There's a lot of retooling and rebooting. I mean, that's just college football. That's how the game works. But Texas came out there and they played a really good game, and especially as you mentioned it in those last few drives, and the game got really crazy because even though they had two drives basically in a row ended nothing, turnover on downs and the missed field goal, it came out 3 play, 75 yards touchdown, yeah, off of a 50-yard pass to Jatavion Sanders. That was a big play there. And then you got the interception and then immediately got a touchdown after that. And then the next drive again got a touchdown. So it was 16-13 Alabama. First touchdown of the game for them. And then next thing you know, Texas is up 27-16 and then 34-24, just like that. So I mean great performance by Quinn Ewers. And hopefully Texas doesn't prove us wrong. We're finally giving them credit. Hopefully they're able to continue it throughout the rest of the season. Um, Obviously, this is their last year in the Big 12. Big 12 doesn't seem to be particularly happy about it. It seems like they're rooting against them, but I understand. But I mean, if Texas continues to look like this, I mean, it's possible that they do lose a few games here and there at some point. We don't know. But if they continue to look like this, obviously Alabama's going to get better, but they still beat Alabama at the end of the day by 10 points. So you can't do anything but give Texas a whole lot of credit. And again, we can finally say Texas is back.